How would you feel if your next door neighbor put 3 feet of filthy, contaminated, and polluted mud and silt in your backyard retention pond that's the size of 1.5 football fields? A pond designed to catch and release flooding rains before they damaged your house, and, when caught, not only thumbed their nose at you, but also called you a liar. The City of Birmingham Eastern Landfill did just that, and then, as a policy, has totally refused to cooperate, even to the point of resisting court orders and state disclosure laws. They're trying to force us to quit and keep the contaminated dirt. Instead, we're in court, but we need an additional $25,000 to continue fighting their arrogance. Money that we don't have, but this is not only for this neighborhood, but also for Trussville's water supply and the other surrounding communities affected by Birmingham's actions. We need your help to continue. Hi, my name is Dan Bays, and I'm the unpaid president of the Magnolia Place Homeowners Association in Trussville, Alabama. Now retired, God has blessed me with several vocations that have me uniquely prepared for this David versus Goliath struggle. When I moved into Magnolia Place in 2004, the subdivision was just being finished. The small sanitary landfill wasn't a problem because Birmingham kept the trash covered and operated it just as their permit required. Our 173 homes were the first of 3 neighborhoods snuggled against the Birmingham Trussville city limits beside the landfill. Our new elementary school would come later. Our lawsuit is about catching them diverting their polluted muck into our stormwater detention pond, which they deny even after seeing hundreds of photographs like this. Unfortunately, this is their standard operating procedure. So who's telling the truth? Birmingham's statement that they never deposited any silt and that all of it came from our property, or my thousands of photographs like this showing Birmingham forcing us to become a nasty, polluted extension of their landfill. Incidentally, the Alabama Department of Environmental Management, or ADEM, has already awarded them with multiple violations, 2 consent decrees, at least $56,000 in penalties and fines, plus upwards of $500,000 or more in repairs. Yet Birmingham still denies responsibility. And this scene was repeated every time one of the frequent gully washer severe thunderstorms came through. How much of this filthy, contaminated liquid mud would you want spread across your backyard before you would want it all removed? Our 173 homeowners, many of them retired and on Social Security like me, or young families just starting out, need your help. Our $37,200 budget is stretched to the limit, especially since we've already spent over $35,000 on repairs and legal fees. The repair estimate to complete the job? Another $160,000, and it'll be much less if Birmingham agrees to take their dirt back, and we think they need to pay for it. The estimated additional legal fees to get it in front of the jury that they're demanding? Another $25,000, and we need it within the next 2 months. We've done all we can from this end, but we weren't expecting Birmingham to be so underhanded. Please go to www.gofundme.com/F and type in Protect Magnolia Place Trussville from Birmingham and donate today. Anything will help, but just 250 people giving $100 each would put us over the top. So would 150 giving $150, etc. Trussville affords her residents a small town hospitality along with the large city conveniences. Our area is part of the population explosion here. The jury trial they are demanding is set for November 18th. The additional money will assure that the jury will see the filthy, contaminated mud and silt that they put on our property. All donations will go toward our legal expenses. Please donate at www.gofundme.com/F. Help protect Magnolia Place, Trussville from Birmingham, and by sharing this video. Finished in 2004, we are a friendly, inclusive Magnolia Place, complete with our own elementary school housing 500 of our children that sits just outside our back windows. All protected by a tornado shelter that is available for us to use when one of the many tornadoes comes our way. After 9 years with seemingly no problems, the problem with the landfill started just after Birmingham's permit was renewed for 5 years in 2012, when all of a sudden they stopped covering the trash as the law required. This introduced us to the sight, smells, and litter of rotting garbage and the droppings from the flocks of scavenger birds constantly flying overhead. The mountain of raw dirt grew over the next 3 years in total disrespect for the law declaring that all stormwater crossing this compost mountain was contaminated and needed to be filtered before being released downstream. Our stormwater retention pond normally fills and empties at a steady rate with each heavy rain. Now, and for the first time in history, and seemingly overnight, it was filled to overflowing with stagnant, murky water with slow percolating bubbles and indiscernible movement just beneath the turbid surface. Simultaneously, there was a sudden tremendous increase in snakes, including copperheads throughout the neighborhood, like this huge one I killed in my backyard. This included a 6 to 8 foot monster rat snake we found swimming in the water, now covered with the landfill's trash. With the drain plugged and the pond overflowing, here is the opaque, contaminated mess that the landfill gave us from just a 1.5 inch rain. Working daily, it took us 9 days to get the drain open just a little. Without rain, all of the contaminated turbidity had dropped to the bottom and the water was crystal clear. This cycle would have been repeated almost every time a front came through and there was a heavy downpour. According to our engineers, this caused 2 to 3 feet of extra dirt and mud in the bottom of our pond. Since this was a new problem, we suspected the landfill. After all, everything that legitimately fed this pond was either forest land, or water from about 2/3 of our 173 homes, or illegally by the landfill. The new school wouldn't even be approved for 9 months after we found the problem. From our complaints to Adam about the exposed trash, we knew that the landfill was in violation daily. But you can't accuse them of allowing unfiltered contaminated stormwater into our retention pond without proof. Proof like seeing the bulldozer side trenches cut in the side, making it easier to route the contaminated water downhill. On May 9th, 2013, I dusted off my flying skills. As we approached the landfill, we were sick with disgust as we discovered that Birmingham appeared to have planned the diversion of polluted water and filth away from their pollution sedimentation pond, so the filth would instead go through our stormwater pond. As we circled, we saw the huge trees and bushes blocking all of their drainage ditch, but only on our side of the landfill. Then Google Earth's measurements confirmed that Birmingham had indeed slanted the top so that all of the water from that end came our way. From the air, we could see that a funnel had been cleared below the maintenance shed to channel their polluted stormwater toward our pond. And what appeared to be a driveway was actually a trench that routed the polluted stormwater from the top towards our pond so it would bypass their stormwater pollution collection point and lower their scores. Yes, Birmingham, right under Adam's nose, apparently secretly developed a way to divert approximately 30 to 50% of the polluted stormwater from the 68 acres their permit required to be filtered by their sediment purification pond, but instead it had been channeled toward our pond where it wouldn't be counted. To confirm my suspicions, I took the approximately 100-foot walk through the wood to our pond's legal address, 3319 Mary Taylor Road, Birmingham, the road that surrounds the landfill. I was completely shocked and astonished to see that what looked like a driveway was too steep to drive a vehicle on, and that it was actually a huge bed of loose gravel, silt, and dirt waiting to be washed either into our pond or downstream, both illegally bypassing their normal pickup point, thus not being counted toward their outflow limits. My shock turned to anger when I saw a rock and tire dam had been constructed with boulders and tires inside of the ditch, completely blocking all water from going downhill to their pond, and that the road was slanted toward us so that all the polluted, turbid water from this huge mountain of dirt and trash would cross over to our side. I was appalled to see that the trees I saw from the air were actually huge trees that had been there, according to Google Earth, for at least 3 years. Incidentally, these trees disappeared within days of our making the complaint to Adam. I saw how steep the mountain was, where the contaminated water and silt careened down the roadway and across the layers and layers of contaminated soil and trash from the top to their maintenance shed, and that they had filled in the ditch that was supposed to carry the polluted water and silt to their filtering pond, but instead allowed it to follow the path that their heavy equipment used. Across the road, where it combined with the contaminated dirt from the maintenance shed area, where it would then either go down the funnel you were just shown or down the side of the road until it made a sharp turn and into the woods into an ever-increasing creek bed filled with rushing, turbid, contaminated liquid mud going downhill through the raw topsoil, past the burst silt fences, until it came out of the landfill's woods, where the polluted liquid mud exited into the Magnolia Place yard before continuing unabated under the fence and into our pond. As you can see from their statement, even while looking at this photograph, Birmingham still denied that this ever happened, and they still do. Instead, Birmingham claimed that the contaminated liquid mud we're seeing in these two photographs, taken 4 months apart, came from several yards, plural, their words, not ours, flowing into the pumping station pad and from the school construction site that was started after the damage was done and is on the other side of the hill that's behind this house, or from the grass yards, again plural, and paved streets, and that their professional engineers could not determine the source of the sediment, if any, that came from the landfill and hit the fence so hard that it eroded a huge amount of dirt away from the fence and carried it downstream. Here is what that contaminated liquid mud from the landfill looked like as it flowed under the fence and joined with the contaminated mud from the other side and then into our pond. That combined with the rocks that were forced under and through the fence surrounding the sewage pumping station pad, where it was joined by a secondary stream of contaminated turbid water and liquid mud from the driveway area that flowed above the pumping station through the neglected burst silt fences and onto our pumping station pad, where the liquid mud would combine with the liquid mud from the maintenance area before exiting, with enough force to eat into the concrete and suck all of the dirt around the fences upright and leaving it dangling, causing the fence to almost fall into the pond. The streams of liquid contaminated mud had enough force to suck the dirt from under the slab further back than the eye could see, causing it to sink. And even though Birmingham denies it, contaminated liquid mud would run off the pad like a waterfall every time frequent gully washer rainstorms came our way. After joining with the cleaner water coming from the school site, the still liquid mud would flow down the emergency trench we had just cut, heading toward the drain. This particular sampling came from a 1.3-inch sudden rain, and it shows what would happen almost every time it rained. Imagine what it was like when the drain was plugged and before that ditch was dug. By the time the landfill's contaminated liquid mud reaches a drain, it is still so thick that it can't mix with our almost clear stormwater before it goes through the drain. As the water from this 1.3-inch rain continues, it quickly becomes more than our 4-foot drain pipe can handle, and the water starts to back up and cover the pond, just like it's designed to do. In a few more minutes, this rain has completely covered our 1.8-acre pond with about 2 to 3 feet of a mixture of their contaminated mud and the water from our streets and yards plus the school. The difference is that the landfill's liquid mud is considered contaminated. The rest of it is not. But by mixing it all together, it is now all contaminated. So I have a question. How much of that would you like scattered across your backyard before you would want Birmingham to take it back? This photograph shows how deep the water was while the drain was plugged. About 1 foot above the overflow drain, with an opening only at the top of this drain, and the amount of dirt we had to excavate to get the drain open before we started any repairs. Ada must have agreed with this evidence, because in answer to our complaint, Birmingham was awarded a consent decree with $51,000 in penalties. And Birmingham still swears they did not put any silt in our pond. This is why we had to file the lawsuit. As a temporary emergency fix, we dug a ditch down the side to the original bottom of the pond, hoping it would get the pond ready to handle the extra water from the school when they started building it in a few months. Here are 2 of our 4-foot inlet pipes, filled with 2 to 3 feet of dirt, and our contractor measuring the 2 to 3 feet of dirt that needs to be removed from our 1.8-acre pond. That's over 7,000 cubic yards, at an additional cost of about $160,000. This matches the 2 to 3 feet of silt that we found in our drain before we cleaned it. Although their professional engineers could not determine where the polluted stormwater came from, we had no problem. We simply went into the woods and followed the gravel sidewalks up the hill to their maintenance shed. This is one of the many letters I wrote to ADEM complaining about Birmingham's blatant violations of the stormwater law. Birmingham responded saying that there was little evidence that their contaminated water had entered waters of the state. Besides the polluted water and mud from the top, we even caught them dumping their equipment oil and fluids from their equipment into the tributaries that feed the Cahaba River. While admitting that the law classifies all stormwater from the active phase and maintenance area as contaminated, and in spite of the evidence, Birmingham still claims that only water from the maintenance area reached our pond, and that it wouldn't substantially impact us. Well, what about the pollution from the landfill itself, and the extra silt in the pond that makes it impossible to maintain, or the bogs that make it dangerous for anyone to walk in, or even lethal for children? Would you like this in your backyard? And no indication of garbage leaving the site? I'm giving God the credit for inspiring me to take these two pictures of the exact spot they were talking about the same time Birmingham was writing their response. Who is lying, our photographs or their statement? Then they promised to build a silt fence downstream to the maintenance shed to better control the stormwater, which they did, only to have it start coming down within weeks, and a short time later the silt fence was gone. And thanks to us, Birmingham received a second consent decree for failing to control their stormwaters that included a $51,000 in fine and penalties for the illegal outflow of polluted stormwater. While still insisting that there was not a problem with their stormwater, Birmingham built a country road size, quote, berm to carry the water that had been going from their maintenance area and into our pond into their purification pond instead. After it failed, Birmingham gave ADEM this response to our complaint. The landfill will admit that after rains of 2 inches or more, stormwater may travel across the berm at 2 small locations, approximately 10 feet apart, each measuring less than a foot wide. Our photograph showed them to be about 5 feet wide and over 2 feet deep. It then flows into the backyard mentioned above. Quote, however, there is no evidence of contaminated sediment or gravel leaving the landfill property into the subdivision. Again, who is telling the truth, them or our photographs showing the actual stormwater flow lines? Incidentally, this is what the water looks like on our streets after a heavy rain. Completely clear and transparent as it drops into our pond. The extra dirt could not have come from the new school because 1, the damage was already done before the school was started, and 2, as shown, the school constructed a stormwater protection system that would hold and filter out the silt even during this 1.8-inch torrential downpour. Plus, the rest of the water is clear. And the street was swept the next day. In compliance with the consent decree, Birmingham had a soil loss analysis done by one of the reputable firms in Montgomery. In spite of the evidence presented, their report only included the area downhill from the maintenance shed and nothing from the landfill itself. Even so, the report admits putting about 20 tons of contaminated sediment in our pond and 70 tons downstream. Birmingham still claims they put none, but They refuse to let us see the contract with the contractor and says we ought to keep the contaminated dirt. Incidentally, this is what the landfill's stormwater looks like as it enters a lake just south of the landfill after a heavy storm. And here is what the 70 tons their engineers estimated looks like after it settles in their lake. Yes, Birmingham denies this also. The law and their permit requires them to collect and control at least the water volume resulting from a 24-hour, 25-year storm. That's 6 to 9 inches in 24 hours, using their settling basins prior to releasing the water into adjacent properties. ADEM's e-file system shows that Birmingham was non-compliant with their stormwater limits for almost every quarter from 2010 to 2013 or longer, sometimes 30 times above the limit. On each of the forms, Birmingham always used the same excuse: too much rain and working with an engineer to modify the locations to get the limits below the requirement. Like maybe routing it through our pond so it wouldn't count? Maybe. We do know that after we provided ADEM with this evidence, Birmingham received discipline and fines. Are they still violating the law and not reporting it? The day I took this photograph, we received 0.93 inches of rain. Using the chart furnished by North Carolina, you can see that their own filtration pond, plus Roebuck Plaza, that feeds into the Cahaba River, both appear to be obviously excessively polluted. Yet there is no record of non-compliance in the ADEM system, and Birmingham will not let us see their records. Yes, this was given to ADEM. We tried so hard to resolve this out of court using every means available to us, including unsuccessfully trying to contact Birmingham's mayor, city council members, state representatives, then ADEM, hoping that they would require Birmingham to fix their mess. In spite of the numerous complaints, warning letters, notices of violation, and even 2 consent decrees, Birmingham still holds on to the same defenses even after we filed suit. The landfill looks nice now, but we know that our cell will reopen shortly after this lawsuit is settled. Unless we win, Birmingham will start doing the same violations unabated. Not only with us, but with everyone. They haven't listened to ADEM, and so far they've even resisted court orders by refusing to deliver items covered by the Freedom of Information Act, court orders, and making us file an expensive subpoena to get discovery items. We wonder, if we don't win, what would it look like 1 month afterwards when they start dumping again? Birmingham has a history of non-cooperation and even brags about not considering the elementary school across the street, saying, "We were here first." Alarmingly, and in spite of their violations, over ours and other objections, Birmingham just received permission to build a new cell adjacent to the one we're complaining about, close to fine restaurants, fine food, shopping areas, and hotels. Worse yet is that this new cell is being built on top of the aquifer that supplies all of Trussville's drinking water, on land susceptible to sinkholes. Birmingham needs to see that people from Trussville will hold them accountable for their actions. Birmingham is not afraid of lawsuits because Alabama law doesn't allow us to recover any punitive damages or legal fees. Thus, we must pay our attorney by the hour, and we don't get it back. To continue, we need your help. Again, please go to www.gofundme.com/F. With our pockets emptied, we've been forced into a David versus Goliath role, without the money needed for the slingshot to work. We need to raise an additional $25,000 for legal fees to help protect Magnolia Place from Birmingham's Goliath. We also need you to spread the word. Your gift through our GoFundMe page will put rocks in David's slingshot. God will guide the rest, and we feel Birmingham will be held responsible for the harm they've done. All we've ever wanted was for them to obey the law and take their contaminated dirt back. We need another $25,000 to make that happen. From myself, the board, and the 173 residents of Magnolia Place, thank you for your participation.